Hi, good morning, and welcome to Kunsang Payo Choling. We're so happy to have you with us today as we show a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. This teaching was given in 1991. The title of the teaching is Why Do We Suffer? And so we will begin.
I would like to talk about in the adult portion of our teaching is the particular situation, the predicament actually, that sentient beings find themselves in. Sentient beings are in a situation that is something of a struggle, in that for sentient beings often they have problems and not much understanding in the way of being able to solve their problems, in that they do not understand how their problems have arisen. They do not understand that they must apply an antidote, and often in their efforts to alleviate their own suffering, they perpetuate their problems. And so I'd like to explain something of the Buddhist idea as to how that actually comes about. The Buddhist idea as to how our suffering comes about may differ somewhat from what we ordinarily consider the sources and reasons of our problems. And certainly I would think that the Buddhist idea of how to solve the problem will differ from what we have been taught in our society. So I hope that you will listen patiently and really give it a shot to settle into your mind. So what I'll try to explain then is the format of the backbone of some Buddhist ideas. Now, according to the way we ordinarily view things, we feel or perceive ourselves to be a real and solid object, stuck kind of in the center of an environment. And we feel ourselves to be interacting with our environment. From our perspective, it seems as though, from what our parents told us, that one fine day we were born. We don't actually remember that, but we've been told that that is the case. And some of us have birth certificates and pictures to prove it. It seems as though we appeared within this environment, we were born, and from that point on, it seems as though circumstances have acted upon us to cause us to form in a certain way. That is a very popular idea. It is the idea of the day. Whenever one wishes to go into some kind of deeper study or deeper awareness according to the potential and how should I say, fad actually of our society, generally, if we are not deeply religious people, even if we are moderately religious people, we will be guided into an understanding of the psychological makeup of an individual and how it interacts with its environment. And accepting the fact that the individual is what it seems to be exactly, no more and no less, we will begin to study what seems to be the cause and effect relationships between an individual and its environment. For instance, we have the idea that if we grow up with kindness, that probably we will be more healthy psychologically, that we will be more stable. And we have the idea that if we grow up with suffering, such as deprivation or even abuse, that we will be not kind really, not caring, and very insecure and very unhappy people. The idea is that if one grows up with abuse and neglect, then one will certainly give abuse and neglect to others. We have the idea that if we grow up with poverty, that we will grow up with characteristics that are natural to the impoverished person, whatever those characteristics are thought to be. But there are certain expected results that we have from the way that we grow up. And actually, people in our society spend it. Comparatively, a fair amount of time looking at the way that they interact with their environment, looking at the characteristics that they have, the qualities that they have, and actually trying to trace them back to things that happened in their early childhood. These are things that we are taught to do, and this is the fashion, actually, of our time and this particular cultural environment. Buddhist philosophy differs from that greatly, actually. The reason why Buddhist philosophy differs so much is that there are certain foundational acceptances that I've just listed that are so ordinary, so normal in our society that we wouldn't even think to question them. For instance, we would not think to question that our experience begins at the time of our birth, and we would not think to question that our experience is completely controlled by the input of our environment and our parents. We would never think to question that. While we might accept the idea that we have come into this life with certain genetic predisposition, we don't really understand that genetic predisposition. We think of it as kind of a chemical thing. And yet, even though we have a certain genetic predisposition, we think that for the most part, our habitual tendencies, our ideas, our qualities have more to do with the way that we respond to the catalysts that are contained within our early life. That's how we think. The Buddha kind of thinks differently about all of that. The philosophy that's presented is actually quite different. In that, the Buddha teaches us that this is not the first incarnation or birth that we have ever taken, that as sentient beings, we have been involved in a great many birth and death experiences, that we are actually locked into what is called cyclic existence or samsara, which is a cyclic death and rebirth experience. We are actually taught that this birth and death process has taken place many times. In fact, if you are a human and you can even hear the word Buddha or can hear the teaching that will bring you closer to enlightenment in any way, shape, manner, or form, then that should be considered proof that you have lived many times, because it takes many lifetimes of accumulated virtue and merit in order for you to be in this position. One does not happen to be in this position just because, in the same way that apples happen to fall from trees. One has to have accumulated a great deal of virtue and merit in order to be in the position of even considering to practice the path of enlightenment. So you have to have had a lot of experience as a sentient being. Well, it doesn't mean that you're at the point where your future is assured. It doesn't mean that you're in such good shape that you really don't have to worry about it. It doesn't mean that it's downhill from here. It means that you still have a lot to do. Because until we achieve enlightenment, actually, we really aren't safe. We are still sentient beings, and we are still revolving in cyclic existence. And we still have the same conditions and situations associated with being a sentient being. But the Buddha teaches us that we must have lived many lifetimes before. So actually, when we come into this life, we are actually an appearance or a rebirth of one who has with them a whole conglomeration of cause and effect relationships already instituted, already begun, already in action, already arising. Some in seed form and some arising in a very obvious and blatant way. If a sentient being has revolved in cyclic existence for some time, they have accumulated many habitual tendencies. They have begun many different causes and experienced many different effects. For some great long time, they have assumed that self-nature, their own self-nature, as well as the nature of all phenomena, is inherently real, and they have for a very long time acted accordingly. According to Buddhist philosophy, that continuation, that stream of continuing assumption can be called a mind stream, a continued push, a movement of dynamic occurrence, all of which is based on the assumption of self-nature as being inherently real and the constant need to hold to self-nature and to define it. So when we come into this life, although we are little drooling children, although we cannot understand very much, we will grow. And as we grow, what we will see is the display of those habitual tendencies, of that continuation, of that movement, of that which is called the mind stream. When we as seemingly individuals hold to the idea of self-nature as being inherently real, in order to do so, in order to continue that continuation of holding to self-nature as being inherently real, we constantly have to distinguish between self and other. Otherwise, we cannot understand self-nature. Self-nature is only a relative term. Self-nature has no meaning unless we continue to define the difference between self and other. So that is one aspect of our habitual tendency that is so deeply ingrained that it must happen automatically. Because if it does not happen, the stream of continuation simply cannot exist. There is no continuation. Believing in self-nature to be solid and real, we must distinguish between self and other. Therefore, we must define other as being solid and real. And so, as we move through what seems to us to be linear experience, the way that we move through that is by clinging to self, defining it, creating all kinds of conceptual ideations surrounding self-nature, constantly being involved in distinction between self and other, and therefore constantly being involved in acceptance, rejection, or indifference to other, reaction. We continue in that mode. What is actually happening here? in the midst of this deluded and very energetic and very involving and actually narcotic experience, this dynamic continuation, it seems to us that we are individuals that are moving through linear time. And that is the delusion, the active delusion that we are involved in. But actually, according to the Buddha's teaching, we are actually experiencing the display of our own habitual tendency, our own mind stream. Because of the belief in the distinction between self and other, because of this basic fundamental assumption of self, from which all reaction, from which all ideation that is the foundation of every circumstance arises, we have our experience, and that is the material of our experience. But actually, if we were to examine our own experience from the point of view of realization, such as the Buddha experienced, if we were to examine at the most profound and most deep level, if we could somehow eradicate our addiction to this kind of experience, our fixation on the solidity of self-nature and its distinction from other, if we could stop reacting, if the mind were completely relaxed, we would understand that what we are actually experiencing is the material of our own mind stream. This is very hard information to take in sometimes. Especially it's hard for Westerners because of our training. And so I like to explain it in whatever way I can, even though the vocabulary is limited and I myself am extremely limited. I like to explain it in whatever way I can over and over and over again. And you know, the interesting thing is that I often get caught in not understanding. It hooks me too. Every time. Recently, I saw again, after not seeing for a very long time, someone whom I considered to be tremendously suffering. Tremendously suffering. Who I've known has had a great deal of the experience of suffering during the course of their life. Someone for whom, in my heart of hearts, I felt, a terrible grief. Terrible grief. And for that person, I always wished that there was some hope. And the idea that I had, although it was on a subtle level, was that that person had been victimized. I know that as a child, that person was a victim of abuse. I know that many circumstances happened that made that person's life very, very difficult. And during the course of that person's adult life, there was tremendous obstacles to overcome, tremendous difficulty. And yet, I know the Buddha's teaching, and I know that the content of our mind stream is constantly being displayed as our lives. But caught in the trap of that idea that somehow we could suffer without cause, that somehow we were not victims, that somehow we were victims, that somehow circumstance could occur to us, and that we were somehow blameless and innocent. I fell prey to that idea. That's never the case. It is never the case. Each and every person that experiences difficulty does so because of cause and effect relationships that they themselves began at some point, perhaps a point that they do not remember. The Buddha teaches us that if we have suffered a great deal, if we do suffer a great deal from loneliness and the longing for love and approval and that kind of need, a strong need, that somewhere in the past, and this is hard to take in, we ourselves were not kind. We ourselves were not supportive of others. We were not generous and loving. Now it may actually be that in this lifetime we have made a real effort to be generous and loving and supporting to others. So you can't go by that. But the Buddha teaches one thing about which I am supremely confident, and I become more and more so with each passing day. That you should never go to a psychic or anybody like that to find out what your past lives are about. If you want to find out what your past lives are about, look in the mirror now. Are you poor? Then you weren't too generous. Are you not so good looking? Then, in the past, you were not, with your body, faithful and loyal and virtuous. That's the truth. Are you lonely? Because in the past, you probably were not kindly and supportive to others. Are you wishing that you had love and have love and there isn't much love in your life? Then probably in the past, you were self-absorbed and really only caring about what you felt and what was going on with you and what your needs were. These are hard things to take in, but the Buddha teaches us that for every single result that we are experiencing, there is a cause, and that cause is within our mind stream. Now that's both good news and bad news. At first, you have to look in the mirror and you have to be real brave and you have to face that. And that's the hard part. That's bad news. Nobody wants to look in the mirror and say, you did that. You have something to do with that. You have some qualities that are in seed form, hidden within your mind stream, that are ripening even now. Nobody wants to take responsibility. We all want to feel only good, and we only want some external force to give us a blessing, and then we'll all be happy in heaven. That's what we really want. Take a pill. Like that. So at first it's very difficult, and I think that the beginning of adapting this philosophy and accepting the Buddha's teaching and beginning to act on it is actually an act of courage. It's tough. It's really tough. What makes it tough? Is it because you have to practice for hours and hours a day? No, that's your choice. You can practice a little bit or you can practice a lot according to your disposition. You can start practicing a little and you can end up practicing a lot. It's really up to you. You can be following the Buddha's teaching at your own level. There's no pressure to do extraordinary amounts of practice. It's not like that. What makes that first step so courageous is that you really have to accept the great law of cause and effect. But the good news is that suddenly you have power. There is an antidote. Before, you were hopeless and helpless. If you looked at your life and there was no love in your life, you could only say, wow, poor me. There's nothing I can do about this. I'm really hopeless and I'm really helpless. What am I going to do? Nobody loves me. And then you can start whining about it. And of course that will never make you happy, and what is it going to do? Is it going to change anything? It will never change anything. It will only alienate others even more, because you will be continuing the root cause of selfishness and self-absorption. It will never produce any good results. And if you are to look into your life and you were to say, well, you know, I'm really not a happy person. I mean, I have many things. I have many physical things. I have a good house and a good car and all kinds of interesting things in my life, but I'm not happy. I don't seem to be happy. And it's just, you know, I'm a victim, and it's just some people are happy and I'm not, and I don't know why other people get all the breaks and why I don't get all the breaks. And you've heard the litany, haven't you? I don't need to repeat it again. I'm sure if you haven't said it recently, then you've said it in the past. And if you haven't said it in the past, then you have, but you've forgotten. But anyway, you can remember somebody else doing it. So I don't have to repeat the litany. But with understanding cause and effect relationships, you can look in the mirror and you can say, yes, up until this time, I have planted seeds that have brought bad fruit. But I have the opportunity to apply the antidote, and I can plant good seeds and reap good fruit. Happiness, love, wealth, joy, contentment, and peace relaxation in any form, even health, are all habitual tendencies. They are all habitual tendencies. Those among us, and there are many, who do not seem to have the karma of happiness or contentment, who cannot achieve any kind of inner peace, cannot do so because they do not have the habit of it. And they do not have the habit of it because in the past they have instituted many causes that bring about the result of such an occurrence. If we have the result in our lives of having no capacity to be able to engage in, for instance, a loving relationship, if it seems that we look around and there really are no loving relationships in our lives, it is because we do not have the habit of it. And we do not have the habit of it because we ourselves in the past did not engage in the giving aspect of that kind of loving relationship. Well, we all think that now we're changed. Now we are engaged in the giving aspect of such a loving relationship. Yes, I'm trying to get a loving relationship. I go from person to person and try to get a loving relationship. I get in everybody's face that I can get my hands on and say, "You will love me." And so I've changed. Now I'm a loving person. I love everybody I can get my hands on. What are you doing? Are you generous? Are you kind? Not in the least. Are you giving love? No, it's all about you. You want, you need, you want, you need. That's what you think about. Because you have the habitual tendency of being needy and loveless due to a lack of generosity in the past. Now the Buddha teaches us that the antidote is not to go out and join a singles club, but rather what we must do is instead to be as loving and as kindly to others as possible, to give without thought of any return. You don't want anything in return. You don't need approval. You don't want approval. You just give. You're kind. Now, at first, most people don't know how to do that. They really are inept at that sort of thing, and they will end up trying to take anyway. So the Buddha gives us an actual series of practices that are antidotal. Very, very different. There are many different kinds of practices, from generating oneself as the bodhisattva of compassion and pouring forth compassion without exception to all sentient beings equally. And you don't get letters back from them, believe me. Pouring out compassion to all sentient beings equally. And in that way, beginning the habit of genuine loving kindness. That's one antidote. That's a good one. And then you can make wishing prayers for all sentient beings. You can circumambulate the stupa going clockwise. Please do so. It makes me happy to know that you've had that opportunity. So you circumambulate the stupa, or you make some offering on an altar, and at the same time you say, by this merit, or by this offering, or by the virtue of this prayer, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. You're lonely? You know what the best antidote to that is? Pray for those who are lonelier than you. Pray endlessly. And don't expect any of them to know that you're doing so. And don't expect anything back for it. That really is an antidote to such suffering. And those that are the unhappiest are the ones that are most resistant to hearing that. But there actually is an answer. There actually is an antidote. And you can begin like that. Now, sentient beings have an interesting preoccupation, and that preoccupation is with self, is with perceiving its solidity, is with holding to it in a grasping and clinging way. And due to that preoccupation, we feel that we actually perceive all things in a dualistic fashion. That means that whatever is the content of our mind stream, we will actually see it flashed out there somewhere. And it will take the form of our lives. And to the degree that we believe ourselves to be solid and real and very, very kind of written in stone and unsurpassably solid, to that degree, our environment feels exactly the same. Now, I'm not suggesting that you walk out in front of a taxi and say, "Hey, you're not really here. See if you can run over me," because it will. Surely it will. You should practice a little more before you try something like that. Lots and lots of meditation, like maybe lots and lots of meditation. I'll give you the go when it's time to stand in front of a taxi. You notice I never stand in front of taxis. But anyway, what we have to begin to do now is on a very subtle level. We have to understand that all of our experience is the revelation or display of our own mind stream. And we have to begin with the very subtle characteristics. That's as hard to do, believe it or not, as walking in front of a taxi is. Maybe harder. You walk in front of a taxi, boom, it's over. You start to be a Buddhist and you look at your life and you realize that this is the content of your mind stream and your suffering has just begun. Because our lives are tough. And this is very hard to realize. You know, sentient beings all of them are fantastic creatures, every one, from human beings to cockroaches, to non-physical beings, the ones that we can see and the ones that we can't see. We are fantastic creatures. Our innate nature is the Buddha nature. In our essence, we are the enlightened mind, the basis of all of our experience. Everything that we have ever experienced is the great primordial emptiness. We are fantastic creatures. That is our nature. In our teaching, it says over and over again, in our nature, we are the all-pervasive foundational bodhicitta, the all-pervasive compassion. We are the very Lord in our nature. That's what it says in all the teaching. But we are so deeply caught up in the habit of self-absorption, so deeply and compulsively caught up in the belief in solidity of self, that the great lamas, the great Buddhas, the great bodhisattvas, they can all come to the earth and they can say, this is what you are, this is what it is, and this is what you should do. And it seems that we have so little capacity to take this nectar and really utilize it, really turn around the content of our experience. How many times have lamas said to us, this is the great truth, this is the great meditation, this is the nature, this is our nature. And this is the method by which we can accomplish the awakening to that nature. And how little has been our regard for that nourishment. It's as though nectar were being poured down from the skies. And we have tiny, tiny, tiny little mouths, unable to open, and great big stomachs full of hunger pain. We can't seem to pick it up. But occasionally, very rarely, as rare as finding a precious jewel by sifting through garbage, occasionally some virtue that we have accumulated in the past, who knows what it was, from feeding a child to accidentally walking around a stupa because you didn't know what direction you were walking in. Some virtue that might have to do with helping someone and might have to do with accidentally doing something that is of benefit to someone in some way that you never could have imagined. Somehow these unpredictable and wonderful events have lined up in such a rare way as to create one moment, one tiny window, and believe me, in the amount of time that we have been sentient beings, this whole lifetime is a very tiny window. That somehow things have lined up into this tiny window that we call a precious human rebirth. And even within this precious human rebirth, Somehow, miraculously, there is this incredible lineup that who could have predicted it? Who could have known how it could happen? There's no way that you can force this to happen. It just happens because cause and effect relationships are like the wind, and you never know which way they're going to blow. And suddenly, they blow in the right direction, and here's this window, and you can hear the Buddha's teaching, and somehow, magically, in the space of that, you are moved. Enough to hear it well. Enough to step out of the compulsive, habitual tendency that has your mind as tight as a rubber band and come up with the brilliant idea, I can change. I can turn this around. I can plant a new seed. I can accept that these are my habitual tendencies, and I can begin to work to apply the antidote. You cannot imagine how rare such a thing is. Even it's possible for all of us to come here and hear teachings every day for the next 300 years. And within those next 300 years, that you would have one such moment, one moment like that, when you say, yes, enough. Let's change. Let's do it now. Let's apply the teaching. And then you really apply the teaching. For those circumstances to line up like that is so rare. It should be considered like the preciousness of a jewel, and as rare as though you had found it by sifting through garbage. Strangely, it's your own garbage, and it's also your own jewel. It's the finding that's the hard part. But here's what you should do. If you have the opportunity to have been born in a precious human rebirth, and you have, then you should play on that immediately by lining up your intention and beginning to make wishing prayers that you will be able to make use of this time. Make them all the time, constantly. Never stop making wishing prayers. Couple those wishing prayers by accumulating the merit and beginning the process of actually being benefit to others, by making wishing prayers that others will also find the precious human rebirth and that they too will find the auspicious circumstances. Begin to work on that a little bit. Line it up. Take hold of it. Don't let it slide by you. You're not a Barbie doll like those little kids were holding. You don't have to sit in class like this or like this. Barbie doll was like this. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that in your mind either. Begin to line up the circumstances. Begin to play on it. Begin to make it happen for you. Come to the teachings. Then when you hear the teachings, listen to the teachings. Listen to them well. Line your mind up. Take a hold of yourself. Take a hold of yourself. You do have that power. If you think that the blessing of enlightenment is going to come from outside, if you think that you have no control, if you think that you're good because your parents made you good or you're bad because your parents made you good, if you think like that, forget it. You're not going to do anything. You're going to wait. You know what waiting produces? Waiting. That's what waiting produces. It produces waiting. It's like the little baby. Was drooling before, drooling after. If you continue to wait, you continue to drool. There's logic in there somewhere. I know you can't think about that right now, but truly. Waiting is not going to help. But to take a hold of yourself and not let the experience of this precious and auspicious opportunity simply slide by you. To open your mind, to make your mind like a bowl, to practice as though nectar were being poured into you, and to really practice, to line it up and to do it. Honestly and truly. You have that opportunity, but only you can line it up and make it happen. Only you can do that. The next piece of information that you really have to take in is that not only are you responsible for being where you are now, and not only are you responsible for what's going to happen next, but you don't have much time. This precious human rebirth goes by as quickly as a waterfall falling down rocks. Depending on how old you are, you'll know that. You partially know that already. You know, I'm 41, and I think to myself constantly how it was only yesterday that I was 18, 19, 20. Only yesterday. In my mind, I feel like a child. I'm not fully grown yet. I feel like I'm not grown up, not mature yet. And I'm halfway through this booger. Now that's true of all of us, and some of us are further along than others. We don't have much time. It's going by very quickly. If you don't take a hold of this opportunity now, you will not be able to utilize it. Please understand that you are deeply involved in a habitual, reactive process. The mind is tight, and it is tightly ingrained in its compulsive habitual tendencies. That you will be able to take advantage of one small moment of spaciousness. That you will be able to really absorb the nectar and really be able to use it, according to the teachings, is really as unlikely as a sea turtle surfacing in a great ocean and coming up through a round circle that is afloat on the ocean. How rare is that? So please, do what you can to make this opportunity as auspicious as possible. Please accept the fact that even though you're hearing the teachings and you're hearing them as well as you can, you're only hearing a little bit of them. The mind is hard. Soften the mind. Go for the nectar of the teaching that leads to enlightenment as though you were a starving being and a thirsty being on a desert where there is no other water to be found. Generate that thirst. Generate that thirst as though your throat were parched, as though there were nothing else. And then aim truly. Try not to make up your own religion. Actually, we've been doing that for aeons and aeons of cyclic existence. We have been making up the religion of self. This is the religion of ego. We have a religion, it's true. Time to convert. Now we need to follow the method that leads to enlightenment, not the one that leads to further self-absorption and more suffering. Remember that all the experiences that you have had are phenomena, that they are direct displays of your own habitual tendency, and therefore as meaningless, really. That the meaningful truth about you is the most glorious truth and the one that you keep forgetting. In your nature, you are the Buddha. And it is possible to awaken to that, and therefore to be free from cyclic death and rebirth and from samsaric suffering. It is possible, but it will not happen without great effort, and it will not happen if you don't begin now. So please do utilize the opportunity, do utilize the teaching. If you go away from this and you change in some way, and of course the idea is to change. If you didn't want to change, you probably wouldn't be here. If you go away from this and change in some way, change sufficiently to where the mind becomes more relaxed, the heart becomes more receptive. If these things begin to happen and you actually begin to practice, begin to make wishing prayers, begin to make kindness the cornerstone, the backbone of your incarnation, of your life, then this day has been worth something. But if you just wanted to sample the wares here, your mind probably is like a bowl turned over, and the nectar, once again, has escaped you. Please take a hold of yourself. Please utilize this precious human rebirth. Please understand the nature of cyclic existence and its faults. And please understand the beautiful and bountiful feast that awaits you upon awakening. So thank you very much for coming here today. I very much appreciate your presence, and I hope that the teaching in some small way has been beneficial to you.
Thank you all so much for being with us today and for partaking of the teaching and learning more about our own nature. Here we are. So we do show these teachings by Jetsunma, which span about 30 or 40 years. Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. and Sundays at 11, both times on YouTube. They are also archived there, so you can find them again. And we offer for you meditation Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. And because the temple is now open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily inside the prayer room, you can come for the meditation class live in person, or you can join again on YouTube like we have been during the pandemic. So we continue offering the online offerings because people can't always get here physically, but now you can if you wish. And it's always nice to be here in person. So please know that you're invited and please come. Each evening we have Medicine Buddha on Facebook Live. And that's a very, very condensed, like 15-minute practice. It doesn't originate in the prayer room necessarily. So that one you join on Facebook. Daily, we offer a feast offering, or they call it a soak. And the soak offering has to do with generating a whole lot of merit so that we have the substance that we need to continue on the path and to make some progress. You really kind of need merit to do that. And this is a great way to do it. So we do. Monday through Friday, we do a soak at 5:30 p.m. and Saturdays at noon. Then Sundays at 2 p.m., we do one that's outside. During the week ones, Monday through Friday and Saturday, are on Zoom, unless you come live. So you can come live in the room or join us on Zoom. Sundays are at the Guru Rinpoche statue across the street, and the internet isn't so great there. So we do try to offer that on Facebook Live. And we're, I'd say maybe 50%, maybe more successful. So you can probably join us that way through Facebook, but also just come in person and join us outside. It's beautiful. And that's at 2 p.m. on Sundays. That's our general schedule, and you can see if there's any changes in it, and also download the practice that you would be doing, and find out where you can join online. You can do all of that on the calendar on what do I want to say? On Tara.org, which is in the chat. You can find that location there. It's you just look under either, oh gosh, I don't know. Let's see, Maryland events calendar or whatever you want. There's a couple of places that calendar exists online. Either one has the same information, and in either case, you can click on the actual event that you're interested in, and the pop-up will show you what the download of the practice is and where to go. So we hope that helps make it easy for you to join. Outside the temple is becoming more and more beautiful as spring sort of works its way, limps its way in here. And so the land across the street, as well as the temple grounds, are always open, probably about the same hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's dawn to dusk. So open a little earlier across the street. But dawn to dusk daily, you can walk the grounds, you can meditate at the stupas, you can all kinds of things. There's plenty of fun animals that you can enjoy and they'll make you laugh. Young goats are our newest. Our newest are itsy bitsy baby chicks, but they'll be out in the yard soon. And so goats, we have pigs, and we have geese and turkeys and many, many, many chickens. And we sell eggs on Sundays. So you can buy lots of different kinds of eggs, and they're absolutely delicious because they're raised by very happy animals who have a very lovely place to live and get a lot of love and attention. Hopefully, you'll be part of that. So join us, and we will see you when we see you. So have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves, and thank you.